In the immense silence of eternity, where men are but shadows passing in the wind, a path opens up that not all can contemplate. This path leads to the depths of existence, to the place where souls who have rejected the light are trapped by their own destiny, hell. It is not a realm of gratuitous chaos, nor a space ruled by whim, but a precise structure where divine justice has drawn circles that enclose the damned according to the measure of their sins. This is how Dante Alighieri narrated it on his immortal journey, accompanied by the spirit of the great poet Virgil. And so our journey begins, as if following in his footsteps, not to condemn, but to understand, to see how pain becomes a symbol and how every sorrow is a mirror that reveals the deepest part of the human heart. Before we begin this journey, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave me a like as a token of your support. It costs you nothing, and it means a lot to me. For now, I need you to get comfortable, close your eyes, and just listen to my voice carefully. Imagine, then, the opening scene, a dark, dense forest where the straight path has been lost. Dante finds himself there, lost, surrounded by shadows that oppress him. There is no light, no way out, only the terror of knowing himself trapped in a seemingly endless thicket. And suddenly, 3 beasts appear before him, a lithe, spotted panther, a symbol of the lust and desire that drags man down, a proud, roaring lion representing the arrogance and violence of power, and a ravenous she-wolf with an insatiable hunger, a symbol of the greed that is never satisfied. Each of these beasts is more than an animal, they are eternal forces that embody humanity's deepest sins. Dante trembles before them, unable to move forward, when a figure emerges from the darkness, the soul of the poet Virgil, who in life had sung the greatness of Rome. It is not just any specter, but a guide appointed by the will from on high. Virgil announces that Beatrice, the lady who embodied grace and virtue, has sent him to save him, to lead him down the most fearsome of paths, the descent into hell. The air grows colder as they advance, until they reach the very gates of the realm of damnation. There rises an inscription, carved in iron and stone, that warns with an eternal echo. For me he goes to the grieving city. For me he goes to eternal pain. For me he goes among the lost people. Justice moved my eye maker. Divine power gave me the supreme wisdom and the first love. Before me nothing was created but the eternal, and I last eternally. O you who enter, abandon all hope. These words pierce the soul like knives. Whoever crosses those doors abandons hope forever. Dante, shaken, feels his heart stop, but Virgil encourages him, reminding him that his journey is not a punishment, but a lesson. Barely have they crossed when a deep murmur envelopes them. These are not yet laments, not screams, but the eternal wailing of souls who never chose either good or evil. They are those who in life were cowards, who never made a decision, who lived in indifference. They are unworthy of heaven or hell. That is why, here in the vestibule, they run eternally behind a banner that never stops, pursued by swarms of flies and wasps that tear them apart. Their tears fall to the ground, mixed with blood, feeding the worms that crawl beneath their feet. Dante observes and understands, this is the first lesson of hell, the price of indecision, of never choosing a path, of living lukewarmly between light and shadow. But beyond the vestibule opens a terrible river, the Acheron, whose dark waters mark the true border of hell. There waits Charon, the old ferryman with eyes burning like embers. With his boat, he transports the damned souls to the other shore, toward the circles of torment. With an oar, he strikes those who hesitate, because no one can turn back. Whoever has reached there must cross. Dante trembles at the sight, but Virgil intercedes. Charon protests, for the living should not tread those lands, but a higher voice resounds and forces him to obey. The boat fills with screaming shadows, and Dante feels the river dragging him toward a fate he can no longer avoid. When they finally step onto the opposite shore, the ground trembles, and the poet collapses. A drowsiness falls upon him, as if the earth itself were swallowing him up. Thus ends the first stage of his journey. His entry into hell is complete, and what awaits him are the 9 circles, each deeper, each darker, each more just in the pain it contains. This is just the beginning, the threshold of a descent that will reveal the most feared secrets of the human soul. The drowsiness that had gripped Dante on the banks of the Acheron gradually dissipates, like a fog receding before an unknown wind. His eyes slowly open, and what he finds before him is not the blazing fire or the clang of chains he might have expected, but a serene gloom, an air without storm, a profound silence interrupted only by muffled voices. Virgil supports him and indicates that they have reached the first circle of hell, limbo. Here there are no heart-rending cries or screams of despair, no visible torments or demonic scourges. The punishment of these souls is more subtle, more tragic, more cruel for its silent eternity, the perpetual absence of God's light. Limbo is a vast realm of shadow, a wide valley shrouded in gentle darkness, where an innumerable multitude dwells. There the unbaptized, those who died before knowing the revealed truth, and also the great sages, philosophers, and poets of antiquity who, though virtuous, never knew the name of Christ. It is not a physical torment, but an exile from paradise, a longing that is never fulfilled. Dante feels a strange pain invade him when he perceives them. They are not evil, they are not criminals, and yet their condemnation is irrevocable. Virgil himself confesses that he belongs here, having died before the arrival of divine grace. His voice, which until now had been firm and clear, takes on a tinge of nostalgia, an echo of sadness that not even eternity can erase. As they advance, the shadows become more visible, and Dante contemplates figures who shone with wisdom in the world's memory. He recognizes among them Homer, the blind poet who sang of the fury of Achilles and the Odysseys of Ulysses, Horace, master of Latin verse, Ovid, who narrated the metamorphoses of the world, and Lucan, who portrayed the Roman civil war with his pen. These four wise men approach Virgil and greet him with honor, recognizing him as one of their own. Then, with a solemn gesture, they invite Dante to join their company. The pilgrim, astonished, walks with them to a higher place, where a castle stands surrounded by 7 walls and defended by a moat of clear water. It is not a fortress of iron or fire, but a symbol. These walls represent the virtues that human thought achieved without divine revelation: prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, and others that together sustain the ancient order. Within that enclosure, Dante contemplates an illustrious assembly: philosophers, scientists, wise kings, all those who in life sought the truth with the power of their reason. There are Socrates and Plato, whose voices still seem to argue about the world of ideas and the nature of justice. There is also Aristotle, the master of those who know, a center of respect and veneration, surrounded by disciples and thinkers. Figures such as Democritus, who spoke of atoms and the void, Heraclitus, with his vision of a universe in perpetual change, Zeno, a living paradox of logic, and Euclid, with his eternal geometries. The atmosphere is not one of torture, but of solemn melancholy. These souls, endowed with greatness, wander in a hopeless kingdom. Their castle, however noble, is not paradise. Their wisdom, however brilliant, was not sufficient to attain the vision of God. Such is their condemnation, to know virtue and reason, but not to have received the grace that opens the door to salvation. Dante observes everything with wonder and respect. A mixture of admiration and compassion grows in his heart, for he understands that he is standing before the heights of the human spirit, condemned, however, to eternal darkness. And in that instant, he understands the justice of the divine. This is not a punishment of fire, but the absence of the supreme splendor, which for these souls means a lack more painful than any whip. Virgil, in a grave voice, explains, these are the souls who lived before faith, or who did not know it. Their merits were great, but they were not enough. They have no torments, except the eternal punishment of yearning without ever achieving. Here I am, beside them, because it was so decreed. A shudder runs through Dante, for the first time he understands that hell is not only punishment for the wicked, but also implacable justice for those who, even through no fault of their own, have fallen outside of grace. In that valley of honorable shadows, Dante feels tiny, like a traveler contemplating a dull firmament filled with stars that no longer shine. He advances, then, alongside Virgil and the ancient poets, knowing that he has yet to see anything of what awaits him in the circles below, where the most terrible sins are punished with atrocious torments. And as he leaves the castle of great minds behind, the air begins to change. It is no longer the solemn silence of limbo, but a growing murmur, like a wind carrying distant screams. Dante feels a shudder. The second circle is near, and there the true hell will begin, where sinners confront the fruits of their passions. The solemn air of limbo dissolves into a disturbing murmur, as if the darkness itself were beginning to breathe with a more ferocious rhythm. Dante, still overwhelmed by the melancholic nobility of the unsaved wise men, feels the atmosphere change. There is no longer calm, no longer silence. A distant wind blows, like a constant moan, and the ground beneath his feet seems to anticipate the shuddering of souls in torment. Virgil observes him in silence and, with a gesture of his hand, guides him toward the second circle, the realm of those who have succumbed to lust. As they descend, a new vision opens before them, a vast, dark space where there is no peace, where the very air is a perpetual whirlwind. It is not a gentle wind or a passing breath, but a raging tempest that never stops. Like leaves swept away by a hurricane, thousands upon thousands of souls spin restlessly, whipped by the current that lifts them and hurls them against the shadows. They scream, they sob, they cling to one another, but the whirlwind mercilessly tears them away, sending them flying aimlessly. Dante contemplates with horror this endless dance of bodies robbed of rest. Virgil explains in a grave voice, "Here are those who in life allowed themselves to be swept away by carnal passion, those who confused love with desire and made it tyrant of their will. Just as the wind moved them on earth, so here the wind drags them forever, allowing them no rest, never giving them stillness." The Florentine poet shudders. He recognizes that in those faces there is beauty and fragility, but also despair. They are not monsters, they are not criminals, they are souls defeated by desire, now transformed into victims of the same whirlwind they saw in life. In the midst of this chaos, a terrible judge appears, sitting before a gloomy door. It is Minos, the mythical king of Crete, transformed here into the guardian of hell. His figure is gigantic, and his face a mixture of authority and fury. Surrounded by shadows that cry out for justice, he listens to each soul that arrives, confessing their sins. Then, with his monstrous tail, which coils like a snake, he marks the number of turns indicated by the circle to which the condemned belongs. Thus the final judgment is carried out, and the souls are cast into the wind that claims them. Dante, overwhelmed, tries to retreat, but Virgil protects him. Minos, seeing a living being in his realm, becomes indignant, grits his teeth, and warns him that he must not continue. But Virgil, in a firm and dignified voice, silences him. This journey does not depend on the will of demons, but on a higher purpose. Minos, overcome by that invisible authority, lets them pass, although his eyes still burn with anger. The whirlwind intensifies, and Dante, moved by compassion, asks his master to allow him to speak with some of the souls swirling there, for among their faces he believes he recognizes stories of love once famous on earth. Virgil nods, and from the crowd of shadows, two gently separate, as if the storm were granting them a moment's respite. They are Francesca da Rimini and Paolo Malatesta, two lovers who in life were united in secret, betraying the sacred bond of marriage. Francesca, with a soft and lamenting voice, introduces herself to Dante. She recounts that she and Paolo fell victim to desire while reading together the story of King Arthur and the love of Lancelot. A single shared glance, a forbidden kiss, and passion consumed them without return. Francesca's husband, upon discovering them, murdered them. Thus they sealed their fate, and now, swept away by the storm, they eternally relive the ardor that condemned them. Francesca's words are sweet and painful, like a broken song. She speaks of love as an irresistible force, as something that draws the soul in without being able to resist. She says, "Love led us to the same death. Love now has us in this whirlwind." And as she speaks, Paolo weeps silently beside her, unable to add a word, his grief locked in a perpetual weeping. Dante listens, moved to the verge of tears. Francesca's story touches him deeply, for he understands that not all sin is born of pure evil. Sometimes it springs from human fragility, from a longing that becomes a prison. The poet collapses, overcome by a mixture of compassion and terror, while the wind continues to roar, carrying thousands of souls in its eternal whirlwind. In this circle, punishment isn't a blazing fire or visible chains, but desire itself turned into a storm. A passion that never finds satiation, a perpetual motion that knows no rest. It's the perfect image of boundless love, of pleasure turned executioner. Virgil, lifting his disciple up, comforts him and warns him that what they have seen is merely a prelude. For the further they descend, the more intense the torments become, the more just and terrible the punishments. And as they leave the second circle behind, the air begins to fill with a new smell, heavy and nauseating, a prelude to the third circle, where the sin of gluttony is paid for in eternal reign. The whirlwind of the second circle fades in the wake of Dante and Virgil, but as soon as they leave, the atmosphere changes again. The air thickens, the darkness becomes denser, and a damp chill penetrates the bones. What arrives now is not the roar of the wind, but a deeper crash, a constant roll of thunder, a wail muffled by every drop that falls from above. They have descended to the third circle of hell, the realm of gluttons, those who in life made appetite their god, giving themselves over without measure to the excess of meat, wine, and the pleasures of the table. Dante looks up and discovers that an eternal, heavy, and filthy rain is falling upon them, never stopping. These are not clear drops of pure water, but a thick downpour, a mixture of hail, snow, and muddy water that falls violently, muddying the earth. The ground is an immense quagmire, a sea of fetid mud where souls wallow without respite. There lie the damned, covered in mud, stretched out like beasts, moaning in the filth. Their bodies thrash in the filthy rain, and their torment knows no respite, for every moment of that storm is a reminder of the boundless appetite with which they lived. In life, they made abundance their treasure. In death, abundance has transformed into perpetual decay. The air is thick with a stench, a nauseating mud that invades Dante's breath. His steps become heavy, as if the earth itself were trying to hold him back. The sight is grotesque. Men and women who were once kings at their banquets, who enjoyed delicacies, wines, and feasts, now reduced to shadows crawling like pigs in the filth. Amidst the wails, a hideous guardian looms, Cerberus, the three-headed hellhound. His jaws are red with blood, his eyes blaze with unquenchable rage, and his roar shakes the air. He is not just a dog, he is a monster whose ferocity embodies veracity itself. With his enormous claws, he tears apart the damned, tearing at their flesh, while his mouths devour without mercy. Each head chews furiously, as if never satisfied. The gluttons, in the mud, receive its bites as part of their punishment. They cannot escape its claws or fangs, for the monster prowls tirelessly, always hungry, always unsatisfied. Dante trembles at the sight, but Virgil wisely throws a handful of muddy earth into the monster's jaws. Cerberus, blinded and satiated for a moment, retreats howling, and the path is open. Among the bodies sunk in the mud, a figure rises to speak to Dante. He is a Florentine named Chaco, nicknamed the Pig in Life for his insatiable appetite. His eyes are dull, but his voice vibrates with pain. He speaks to Dante of the conflicts in Florence, of the political wars that would tear the city apart, of the corruption that would drag so many to ruin. His prophecy is bitter, and Dante listens attentively, knowing that even in hell, the shadows carry with them the memories of the earth. When Chaco finishes his story, he falls back into the mud, once again submerged in the formless mass of the damned. Virgil then explains the meaning of this punishment. These are those who in life abandon themselves to excess, those who made the pleasure of the mouth their sole master. Like beasts they lived, like beasts they now wallow in the mud. The filthy water that lashes them is the mirror of their perpetual craving, which has never known measure. Dante feels a pang in his heart. He doesn't see them as monsters, but rather as human beings who in life were unable to resist the temptation of abundance, and who now pay with an inglorious eternity, stripped of all pleasure, immersed in a filth that never dries. The mud seems endless, and screams mingle with the roar of the rain. The mud smells of decay and misery, and every step is a struggle against the density of the earth. But Virgil encourages him, reminding him that this journey is not to dwell on compassion, but to learn from the justice that governs this kingdom. In the distance, beyond the muddy shadows, Dante perceives a reddish glow, as if a bonfire were hiding its flames behind a veil of smoke. Virgil warns him that the path to the next circle will lead them to the realm of the avaricious and the prodigal, where riches squandered or greedily accumulated become eternal chains. And so, leaving behind the pestilence of the third circle, the poet advances with uncertain steps, knowing that each descent brings him closer to the heart of hell, where the punishments are crueler and the sins deeper. The stench of the third circle remains behind like a memory that still clings to the skin, as Dante and Virgil advance toward a place where the gloom grows heavier, and the sound is no longer that of the filthy rain, but a metallic clash, deep and repeated, as if the eternal clash of invisible weapons resounded in the bowels of the earth. They have reached the fourth circle, the realm of the miserly and the prodigal, those who in life made an idol of wealth, either accumulating it greedily or squandering it in immeasurable excess. Here, condemnation is not measured in blood or fire, but in a futile effort that never finds rest. Before the Florentine poet's gaze, a vast circular plain opens, illuminated only by a shadowy glow reflected off enormous objects. They are immense round rocks, like gigantic millstones, which countless souls push with the weight of their condemnation. They advance with superhuman effort, bent over, sweating in torment, pushing those masses with their hands and chests. But their path is always the same. They meet in the middle of the plain, where those who hoarded and those who squandered collide. At that moment, they strike each other furiously, hurling eternal insults. The misers shout at the spenders, "Why did you spend so much?" And the spenders reply, "Why did you hoard so greedily?" After the clash, they turn around and push their stones again, repeating the endless condemnation. Dante, stunned, watches this aimless struggle. There is no victory, no respite. It's a perpetual cycle of futile effort, a vivid illustration of how money, in life, was a useless burden that never satisfied and has now become a rock that crushes the eternity of these souls. Looming over them is a grotesque guardian, Pluto, the ancient god of wealth, deformed into an infernal demon. His face is furious and confused, and incomprehensible words, like the babble of a devil, come from his mouth. When he sees Dante and Virgil, he bellows violently, but Virgil confronts him firmly, reminding him that no infernal force can stop the plan from on high. Before this authority, Pluto collapses, as if Virgil's voice had stripped him of his power. The clash of rocks continues to resound, an eternal sound that echoes across the plain like a never-ending war drum. Virgil explains to Dante the meaning of that punishment. These are those who on earth allowed themselves to be enslaved by gold. Some hoarded it greedily, forgetting the good that could come from it. Others thoughtlessly squandered it, indulging in the folly of excess. Both, unable to find the measure, now forever repeat their error, facing each other in a battle that will never end. Dante, moved, asks if among those shadows he might recognize any men famous for their avarice or their prodigality. Virgil answers no, for the gold rush strips souls of all identity, and what remains of them is only a gesture, a nameless condemnation, a uniform destiny in which faces disappear under the shadow of their sin. The air here is heavy, laden with a darkness that seems to emanate from the metal itself. Dante perceives that this circle is not filled with blood or fire, but encloses an even crueler torment, that of eternal futility. Those stones, which never stop, are the exact reflection of the obsession that was never satiated. In the distance, at the end of the plain, a river begins to be heard. Its deep murmur mingles with the metallic clatter of stones. Virgil points ahead and says, "The road will soon lead us to the Styx, the swamp where the angry and the lazy drown, souls who let their fury or their inertia rule their lives. There, water will not be consolation, but a prison. Prepare yourself, Dante, for pain grows more cruel with every step, and hell does not reveal its secrets without also tearing something from the soul of the beholder." The Florentine poet nods, though he feels his heart tighten. Every circle he has seen is not only a punishment for others, but a warning for himself, for every human being. As they leave the perpetual crashing of rocks behind, Dante walks with uncertain steps, knowing that the air of the next realm will be thick with hatred and fury. And so, as the sound of stagnant water approaches, the earth darkens, and the hope of finding beauty fades a little further on the journey to the bottom of damnation. The echo of the clashing rocks in the fourth circle slowly fades, and in its place another murmur begins to grow, deeper, wetter, more visceral, the murmur of rarefied, stagnant water, which no longer flows like a living river, but rots within itself. Dante and Virgil descend, and the air they breathe is heavy, suffocating, laden with a stench that seems to rise from the depths of the earth. They have reached the fifth circle of hell, where the waters of the Stygian swamp spread out like a dark and pestilent sea, a bubbling lake of mud beneath the eternal gloom. There, amidst that mud with no visible shore, the damned suffer, those who in life were dominated by unbridled rage and spiritual laziness. The swamp churns violently. On the surface, like human beasts, the angry ones tear at each other. They bite, strike, and drown each other, while the mud foam covers them. There is no pause in their fury. Their rage, which consumed them in life, here multiplies infinitely. With fists and teeth they wound each other, with screams they curse, with their eyes they burn with perpetual hatred. The swamp is their eternal battlefield, and rage their food and their executioner. But not all are on the surface. Beneath the muddy water, invisible to those who don't know how to look, the lazy ones are drowning, those who in life refuse to act, who let life pass without struggle, without effort, without passion. Their bodies lie motionless beneath the mud, unable to emerge, while slow bubbles rise to the surface. And in those bubbles, a faint whisper can be heard, a muffled lament that says, "Sad we lived in the sweet air, and now sad we lie in this mud." It is the eternal moan of those who never rose up against anything, neither for nor against, and now cannot even move in their condemnation. Dante observes the boiling surface of struggles and bites, and at the same time perceives the macabre stillness of the shadows beneath the water. He understands that anger and sloth are two extremes of the same sin, the denial of balance. Some live dominated by an excess of fire, others by its complete lack. Both now drown in the same swamp, trapped in the misery of what they once were. The air vibrates with the shouts of the angry and the stifled wails of the lazy. The Styx is not just water, it is a mirror of the soul, dark, murky, poisoned. In the midst of this spectacle of fury and lethargy, an unexpected figure emerges. A soul, covered in mud up to its face, tries to cling to the boat in which Virgil and Dante have embarked across the swamp. It is Filippo Argenti, a Florentine known in life for his arrogance and brutal anger. He recognizes Dante and confronts him with cries of rage, reaching out with his filthy hands to submerge him. But Dante, far from pitying him, feels contempt and firmly rejects him. The other condemned men of the swamp, seeing Philip vulnerable, rush toward him and tear him to pieces in a frenzy of hatred, dragging him beneath the mud. Their screams are muffled by a dark bubbling. Dante, who had previously wept for Francesca, who had felt compassion for Chaco, now finds himself hardened. The sight of Philip brings him a strange relief, as if he understood that the justice of hell does not always merit tears, but sometimes approval. Virgil smiles discreetly, celebrating that his disciple is beginning to discern not only pain, but justice and punishment. The journey across the Styx continues, and the mud crashes against the boat as if trying to sink it. On the horizon, through the mist, an imposing vision appears, a walled city, with burning walls and towers ridden by eternal flames. Its gates are made of incandescent iron, and demons hover over them, watching with hatred and disdain. This is the city of Dante, the threshold to the deepest circles of hell. Dante feels a chill. The Styx is behind him, but what opens before him is even more terrible. Virgil warns him, up to this point, we have seen punishments that reflect unbridled passions, human sins in their most common form. But beyond these walls begins the true hell, where the perversion of the spirit sinks to its root, and where suffering becomes more cruel, more acute, more absolute. Prepare yourself, Dante, for you will soon see torments that would break the mind of the most steadfast man. And as the boat approaches the burning walls of Dante, the demons rise, blocking the way, their distorted faces illuminated by the eternal fire. The descent stops at that threshold, where the darkness is densest and the danger is closest. The journey now approaches a boundary that divides the first circles, those of human passions, from the abysses where sins touch the deepest depths of reason and spirit. Dante and Virgil find themselves before the imposing vision of the city of Dante, whose incandescent walls rise like colossi of iron ridden by a fire that never goes out. The towers extend into the distance like sentinels of an impenetrable kingdom, and each battlement seems like an eye of fire watching from the shadows. The air vibrates with a stifling heat, thick with smoke and sulfur. It is not the life-giving fire that ignites life, but a fire of hatred and destruction, a reminder of the eternity of punishment. At the gates, demons with fierce faces and eyes like glowing embers block the boat's path. Their bodies seem fused with the same burning iron of the walls. Their deep, roaring voices intertwine in a chorus of rejection. Who dares bring a living soul into these halls of death? Let him return. Let him not enter where only the damned dwell. The demons, with their hostility, attempt to block the path. Dante, trembling, feels the fragility of his human body in the face of the fury of those creatures. His knees buckle and his heart beats with the weight of despair. Virgil, however, maintains the firmness of a wise man who knows the supreme will. This journey is not the work of chance, he declares in a firm voice. Providence has decreed it, and nothing and no one will be able to stop its course. But the demons do not yield. The gates of Dante close with a bang, and the echo of that slam resounds like an iron thunderclap that wounds the soul. Dante feels abandoned to powerlessness, like a lost wanderer facing an unbreakable wall. For the first time, his faith wavers. Virgil himself, though serene, displays the shadow of a concern. Entry to Dante cannot be achieved with words. An ominous silence pervades the Stygian swamp, interrupted only by the moans of the damned still bubbling in the mud. Then, a murmur pierces the darkness. Something descends from on high with the force of lightning. The air splits as if ripped open by an invisible sword. And a heavenly messenger appears, a being belonging neither to the realm of damnation nor to that of mortals. His mere presence drives back the demons, who tremble and scatter like leaves blown by the wind. The messenger doesn't look at Dante or Virgil. He shows neither affection nor anger. With a cold, sovereign gesture, he knocks on the gates of Dante, and they open wide without resistance. Not even the burning iron and the flames that guard him can resist the power that accompanies him. Without a word, the messenger disappears, and the silence he leaves behind is even more overwhelming than the thunder with which he arrived. Virgil smiles slightly. The path is open. Let's keep going, for there's still much to see. Dante feels his heart beating with a new pulse, not complete security, but the certainty that divine will guide his journey. Crossing the gates of Dante, a terrifying landscape opens before them. It is the sixth circle of hell, where the heretics lie. It is no longer those who allow themselves to be carried away by immoderate passions, but those who denied eternal truths, who challenged faith in the very essence of the divine. Here there is no mud, no whirlwinds, no rains of fire. There is a vast cemetery, an endless field of burning graves that illuminate the darkness with their sinister glow. Every grave is open, and within it tormented souls stir. The fire that consumes them does not destroy them, but keeps them burning in perpetual pain. It is not the fire that devours flesh, but the one that burns the conscience, which recalls every denial, every word of contempt, every perverse doctrine uttered in life. The air is permeated with an unbearable heat, and a stench of ash and burning flesh pervades everything. Dante covers his face with his hands, but the smoke penetrates his lungs anyway, forcing him to cough and feel the nausea of eternal torment. Virgil supports him, reminding him to endure. Here it is not the weak of passion who suffer, but the proud of spirit. Observe and understand what happens to those who close their eyes to the truth. Among the tombs, Dante distinguishes familiar figures from history and from his own land. One of the damned, rising from the flames of his tomb, calls Dante by name. He is Farinata degli Uberti, a Ghibelline leader who in life was an enemy of Dante's political faction, but also a man renowned for his strength and his heresy. He stands amidst the fire as if he still retained the dignity of a warrior, and converses with Dante with a pride that not even condemnation has been able to break. He speaks of Florence, of political struggles, of his own destiny, and his voice is deep, grave, laden with contempt for the suffering that surrounds him. Yet, in the same tomb, a different shadow rises. It is Cavalcante de Cavalcanti, father of Guido, Dante's closest friend. Cavalcante does not rise with dignity, but is consumed by a more intimate torment, concern for his son's fate. He desperately asks for Guido, anxious to know if he still lives and if he shares the fortune of his lineage. Dante, entangled in his words, answers ambiguously, and Cavalcante falls back into the flames, overcome with grief. The contrast strikes Dante. Implacable pride and paternal anguish coexist in the same fire, two faces of heretical condemnation. The vision moves him, and his mind fills with questions about the nature of the soul, time, and the knowledge of the damned. Virgil patiently explains, the souls here know the future, but not the present. They see what will come, but not what is happening at this moment. Thus, their suffering is twofold. They anticipate what is to happen, but they ignore what is happening now. With this revelation, Dante understands the magnitude of the torment. The heretic not only burns in fire, but lives in a perpetual disconnect from reality, unable to fully know what he is or what he will be. The sixth circle stretches out like an endless sea of fire, a graveyard of arrogance and denial. Dante feels the weight of the heat on his skin and the burning in his soul, but he knows he must continue. Virgil guides him to the edge of the circle, where a narrow path opens between rocks leading below to the seventh circle, the realm of violence in all its forms. And as they advance, the glow of the burning graves fades behind them, like a memory that never stops burning. Leaving behind the glow of the burning tombs where the heretics lie, Dante and Virgil head toward a shadowy crevice that yawns between rock walls. The stifling heat of the sixth circle gradually dissipates, but in its place emerges a harsher, denser air charged with violence. It is a breath that stings the skin and does not come solely from matter. It is the emanation of spirits torn apart by the world's wrath, of those who made violence their mark on the earth. The path breaks into a steep descent, and the travelers arrive at the seventh circle of hell, the realm where the violent are punished. It is not a single chamber, but three, each dedicated to a type of brutality: violence against one's neighbor, violence against oneself, and violence against the divine. Virgil raises his hand and points to the expanse before them. Here, Dante, dwell those who have shed blood, those who have wounded the gift of life, those who have degraded themselves in their own flesh, and those who have defied the sacred with hatred. Observe and understand, for violence, however manifold, always leaves eternal scars. The first chamber is presented as a vast river of boiling blood, the Phlegethon, a torrent flowing with dark force under a sky heavy with embers. Murderers, tyrants, and warriors who in life delighted in killing boil in it. The bodies of the condemned emerge at different levels above the chest, according to the gravity of their crimes, some barely submerged up to the waist, others up to the neck, and still others completely submerged except for a stifled scream. Guarding the banks of the Phlegethon ride the centaurs, figures half man and half beast, armed with bows and arrows, ensuring that no one escapes from their designated depths. Every time a condemned man tries to venture further than permitted, an arrow pierces him, forcing him to sink back into the boiling blood. Dante watches in horror. He recognizes among the drowned Alexander, the bloodthirsty tyrant, and other names that resonated with cruelty in his time. Virgil leads him to where Nessus, one of the centaurs, stands, offering to guide them across the river. Thus, mounted on the back of the mythological creature, they cross over the muffled screams and the vapors of blood that rise like sacrificial smoke. Once they reach the other shore, they descend into a gloomy forest. There, the branches are neither green nor alive, but twisted, dry, blackened like burnt charcoal. The wind moans through them as if the forest itself were weeping. This is the second enclosure of the seventh circle, where those who have committed violence against themselves suffer, suicides, and those who squander their lives. In this forest, there are no visible human bodies. Dante, curious, breaks a dead branch, and dark blood flows from the wound as a cry of pain resounds. Virgil reveals the truth: the souls of the suicides have been imprisoned in the trunks of those trees. They no longer have human form, for they spurned the flesh that was given them. Now they live eternally as torn bark and thorny branches. From between the trunks comes a prolonged wailing. It is the voice of Pier della Vigna, advisor to Emperor Frederick II, who in life was unjustly accused and took his own life. He recounts his bitter fate to Dante and prays that when the traveler returns to the world of the living, his story be told fairly. Dante listens, moved, and the entire forest seems to groan with him, for each tree contains a tragedy that is eternally renewed. But it's not just the trees that weep. In the middle of the forest, furious black dogs suddenly appear, symbols of ruin and despair, chasing the wasteful. These, naked and filled with terror, flee among the branches, and when they are caught, the beasts tear them to pieces. Thus the torment is repeated endlessly, violence against oneself transformed into prey in a hellish hunt. Further down, the path opens onto an even more terrifying landscape, an immense, burning plain covered in incandescent sand like an endless desert, upon which a rain of fire eternally falls. This is the third enclosure of the seventh circle, designated for those who have committed violence against God, nature, and art. The ground burns upon contact, and the flames that fall from the sky pierce the bodies like burning arrows. The damned lie or walk, each according to their sin. The blasphemers, who raise their voices against the divine, lie face up, defying with their faces the sky that burns them. The sodomites, who violated the natural order, wander restlessly in circles, unable to stop, because the fire intensifies when they try to rest. The usurers, who have dishonored art and human labor by profiting without creation or effort, sit hunched on the ground, their hands waving in the air to ward off the flames that never cease, wearing bags around their necks marked with the symbol of their lineages as emblems of their guilt. Dante contemplates the spectacle, and among those who walk onward, he recognizes Brunetto Latini, his former teacher. The encounter shakes the poet, for the man he respected and admired now burns under the fire of damnation. They converse while the flames sting him, and Brunetto, still in his torment, encourages Dante to pursue his poetic destiny, for within him lies a higher mission. Dante listens with held-back tears, but knows he must move forward. Beyond, the fiery desert stretches out to the horizon, and every spark that falls from the sky recalls the eternity of that torment. Virgil guides Dante to the edge of this circle, where a river of fire cascades into even darker depths. You have seen violence in all its forms, Virgil tells him, against one's neighbor, against oneself, and against the divine. But what awaits you now is even more serious. The circles where fraud and betrayal, sins of reason and spirit, poison the soul more than anger or hatred. And there, at the edge of the fiery waterfall, they await the winged guide who will lead them into the depths of the eighth circle. The seventh circle is left behind like a vast memory of blood, of torn forests, and of burning sands where flames fell like cursed rain. Dante, still trembling from what he saw, approaches with Virgil the edge of an immense abyss, a precipice so deep that even the eye cannot measure it. From its depths emerges an abysmal murmur, as if 1,000 sibylline voices moaned in unison. A fiery wind rises from there, mingled with the red glow of fire and the stench of ancient corruption. At the edge of that cliff awaits a monstrous creature, a hybrid being that belongs neither to air nor to earth. It is Geryon, the guardian of fraud. His face is human, serene and almost sweet, with an honest and trustworthy appearance, but his body, long as a snake's, twists in coils covered with multicolored spots, and his tail ends in a poisonous stinger more fearsome than a scorpion's. His bat-like wings open over the abyss, raising a dense and suffocating air. Virgil points this out and explains, this is the image of fraud, the face of truth, the body of deceit, and the tail of death. This will be our vehicle for descending into the eighth circle. Dante feels his heart shudder. The mere thought of entrusting his life to such a creature is torment. However, Virgil encourages him, assuring him that Providence protects him. Geryon approaches slowly, as if gliding his immense body over the void. His face appears affable, but in his eyes burns the perfidy of an ancient evil. Dante climbs onto his back, embracing the master like a child to his father in a storm. Then, Geryon spreads his wings and throws himself into the abyss. The descent is terrible, the air hisses violently, darkness closes in around it, and vertigo tears a cry from Dante's lips. The creature spins in circles, like a ship lost in a whirlwind, descending ever lower, until finally, with deceptive gentleness, it deposits them on a firm rock in the bowels of hell. There lies before them the eighth circle, called Malbolge, a vast amphitheater of black rock divided into 10 concentric pits, each dedicated to a different kind of fraud. From above, it resembles a monstrous inverted honeycomb, a succession of scars in the earth, a labyrinth of eternal traps and deceptions. Stone bridges run between the pits, allowing one to see from one to the other, like balconies of torment. The air here is thick with a pestilent stench, a mixture of sulfur, corruption, and distilled deceit. An endless murmur rises from every pit, screams, wails, blasphemies, futile pleas. Fraud manifests itself not in external violence, but in the poisonous cunning that corrupts the soul, and each pit reflects the deformity of that cunning. Virgil guides Dante toward the first of them. Look carefully, for here malice takes many forms. Every grave is a mirror of human falsehood, and every condemned man is a slave to the lie he practiced in life. In the first pit, the souls of the ruffians and seducers stir, who in life deceived others with false promises and lustful words, dragging others toward perdition. Now they walk in endless lines, naked and humiliated, while demons lash them with burning whips that tear at their flesh. Their bodies shudder under each blow, but they cannot stop their march. They must walk eternally, as if dragged by the very deception they sowed. Dante contemplates their faces, distorted by pain, and in their eyes, he discovers the reflection of the lust and lies that condemned them. In the second pit are found the flatterers, who in life used false flattery to obtain favors and advantages. Their punishment is to swim in a river of nauseating excrement, for their word, which on earth was dressed in honey, here becomes the pestilent mud it truly was. The stench is so unbearable that Dante must cover his face with Virgil's cloak, and even then he feels his stomach twist. They advance toward the third pit, where the simoniacs lie, those who corrupted the sacred by selling church offices and prostituting the faith. They are nailed upside down in narrow pits, their legs exposed, their feet consuming flames. Among them, Dante recognizes some popes who once occupied the See of Peter. He is shaken by horror and is outraged that the very church that should guide souls to heaven has been used as currency. Virgil calms him, reminding him that divine justice is revealed here and that no title on earth can escape it. Beyond lies the fourth pit, where the diviners and magicians, those who sought to see the future and alter divine will, are found. Their punishment is grotesque. Their heads are twisted backward, forced to walk always looking backward, unable to see ahead. Their tears fall on their backs, and their steps falter in the darkness. Dante weeps with compassion at seeing them so deformed, but Virgil rebukes him. There is no room for pity here. These people chose to deceive with the occult, and now they live in the contradiction of their own vision. As he passes by, Dante recognizes illustrious names: Tiresias, the Theban soothsayer, among others who became famous in his time. Each one carries his condemnation like a symbol of willful blindness. The remaining pits are not yet fully revealed, but from a distance Dante hears distinct cries, the clatter of bribes, the wailing of hypocrites under garments of lead, the rot of thieves pursued by serpents, false counselors engulfed in flames, sowers of discord made by demonic swords, and, finally, counterfeiters lying in pestilence and disease. The entire Malbolge is a theater of deception transformed into truth. Where falsehood reigned in life, it now reveals itself naked and brutal. Dante feels his soul shudder at such a multiplicity of torments, but also that his understanding of sin deepens. There is no such thing as small deception, nor innocent cunning. Every lie opens an abyss that ultimately devours. Virgil takes him by the arm and whispers solemnly, "You must remain strong. We have not yet seen the worst. Here lies simple fraud, but deeper awaits fraud against those who trust us most, betrayal." And that, Dante, is the deepest wound of the soul. The murmur of the 10 pits surrounds the travelers like a chorus of shadows. Dante, his face marked by terror, prepares to continue his descent. In the depths of that descent of no return, Dante and Virgil now approached an abyss vaster and darker than before. The atmosphere itself seemed to harden, and the air, permeated with a thick silence, was barely pierced by distant cries that mingled with the wind. They had left behind the circles where flesh, desire, gluttony, and violence had cast their shadows, and entered a realm where not only acts were punished, but the very essence of betrayal, the circle of the fraudulent. Here, condemnation was not a simple physical punishment, but a perpetual theater of deceit, a reflection of the crooked cunning with which these damned had corrupted the world of the living. As they progressed, Virgil explained to Dante that this circle was not like the others. Instead of a single general punishment, it was divided into multiple chambers, 10 deep, concentric pits descending one after another, like steps in a labyrinth created by the minds of demons. It was the Malbolge, a valley of manifold evil, each pit reserved for a specific type of deception, each torment precisely tuned to the nature of the sin. There, the logic of hell reached its cruelest perfection, for fraud was considered the most human of sins, a poison born not of the flesh, but of the corrupted intellect. In the first of these pits, Dante saw those who in life had used the body and words as bait, the ruffians and the seducers. They were naked, marching in endless lines, whipped by demons armed with fiery whips that tore at their flesh with each blow. Each step was accompanied by screams that faded into the distance. Some had their faces sunken in shame, others, distorted by pain, seemed to still whisper false promises that no one heard. They were the ones who had transformed love into currency, seduction into a tool of corruption. In the second pit were the flatterers, those who had falsely flattered others to gain power or benefit. They found themselves submerged in a river of stinking manure and endless mud that covered them from head to toe. They swam and splashed, their faces distorted by nausea, as if their flattering words had transformed into the filthy matter they now breathed. Dante covered his face from that unbearable stench, understanding how the lie told to elevate others had ended up sinking them into eternal decay. Further on, in the third pit, they found the merchants of the sacred, simoniacs who had sold indulgences, sacraments, and the divine for coins. They were buried face down in circular holes that blazed with flames, their feet sticking out, dancing in the air as they were incessantly burned. Their bodies resembled human torches stuck in the ground. Dante, moved by the spectacle, recalled the corruptions of his time and felt the heat of indignation in his chest. Virgil stopped him, reminding him that his mission was not to judge, but to understand. In the fourth pit were the soothsayers and magicians who in life had attempted to see the future, distorting the divine order. Here, their punishment was grotesque. Their bodies were twisted so that their heads pointed backward, and their tears ran down their backs as they walked in circles. Their steps were uncertain and clumsy, for as they tried to advance, they could only contemplate what they were leaving behind. It was the cruelest mockery of their ambition to foresee the future, condemned to eternally look into the past, unable to find the path ahead. Upon reaching the fifth pit, the darkness was even thicker, and there were those who had manipulated positions and bribes, the Barateros. Submerged in a river of boiling tar, their bodies bubbled and slowly dissolved in the viscous blackness. Demons with hooks held them below the surface when they tried to emerge, laughing maliciously, pinning them back into the cauldron. That sight had the crudeness of a macabre spectacle, where political corruption became an eternal cauldron of bodies that burned without being consumed. In the sixth pit, the hypocrites crawled, covered in golden robes that gleamed with the beauty of gold, but were lined with lead inside. They moved heavily, bent under the unbearable weight of those garments that symbolized the falseness of their lives. The contrast was heartbreaking, shining on the outside, agonizing on the inside. Each step they took was a slow confession of their lie. In the seventh pit, the thieves appeared wrapped in a grotesque spectacle. Endless serpents surrounded them, biting them and merging with their bodies. Some were reduced to ashes, only to be reborn and attacked again, others transformed into monstrous amalgams of man and reptile, losing the form they had held. Theft, the snatching of what belonged to others, became a perpetual metamorphosis here, where no one retained a fixed form or a stable identity. In the eighth pit were the false counselors, engulfed in flames that didn't consume their bodies, but instead used them as wicks. They walked like human torches, and their words came out as fiery crackles. Each one burned in isolation, condemned to talk to himself, locked in his own flame, remembering how his deceitful words had been bonfires that consumed the lives of others. In the ninth pit, Dante shuddered at the sight of the sowers of discord, those who had divided families, kingdoms, peoples, and faiths. Their bodies were ripped from head to belly by sword-wielding demons. With each wound, their flesh closed only to reopen again in a perpetual cycle of pain. They walked with their organs exposed, bearing in their raw flesh the reflection of the devastation they had sown in the earth. Finally, in the 10th pit were the forgers, alchemists, false witnesses, coin counterfeiters, and all manner of impostors. There, their bodies suffered eternal illnesses. Some were covered with leprosy, others swelled as if about to burst, some burned with fever without respite, and all breathed a pestilent air that reminded them of the poison they had injected into humanity with their forgeries. Dante watched in silence. Each pit was a crooked mirror of human ingenuity, each punishment a parable of what happens when intelligence strays from the path of truth. In the Malbolge, hell had ceased to be merely fire and physical torment and had become a tribunal of living symbols, where sins were punished with the precision of an irrefutable destiny. Virgil, in a grave voice, announced that the deepest part was still to come, a final circle, darker than anything seen so far. There, at the absolute depths, it was no longer violence or common fraud that was punished, but rather the sin that corrupted the very core of trust, betrayal. And so, with his heart heavy and his mind troubled by the horrors he had seen, Dante followed his guide into the abyss that would lead them to the ninth circle, where the frozen eternity of the worst of sins awaited. The descent into the final abyss began with a sensation that came not from sight, but from the soul itself. Dante and Virgil left behind the echo of the Malbolge wailing, and as they advanced, an even more terrible silence enveloped them. It was not the calm of peace, but the stillness that precedes a shudder. The air grew thicker and thicker until suddenly its nature changed. It no longer burned with fire or choked with stench, but became icy, as if a breath of eternal winter escaped from the very heart of the earth. The ground began to tilt, and each step led them toward a shadowy vastness that seemed endless. Here, the very walls of the rock were covered with frost, and the shadows of the damned appeared carved in the ice, prisoners of a cold that left no movement. Dante, trembling, understood that they had left behind the fire of human passions and entered a realm where the warmth of life was forbidden. Betrayal, the deepest of sins, didn't burn, it froze. Virgil spoke to him in a firm voice, "Prepare yourself, Dante." Until now you have seen torments that reflect the disorder of desire, anger, or avarice. But here, in the ninth circle, what lies punished is that which destroys the very foundation of all trust, betrayal. This circle is called Cocytus, a lake of eternal ice, where traitors are buried in layers of frost according to the gravity of their perfidy. Here you will not see flames, but ice crystals that rob you of all hope of warmth. As he approached, Dante saw the immensity of the frozen lake, an endless plain of crystal broken by dark fissures, illuminated by a pale glow that seemed to come from nowhere. The ice was littered with trapped bodies, some with their heads barely visible, others covered up to their lips or eyes, motionless, with tears that, as they fell, turned into shards of crystal, further imprisoning their faces. There were no movements of demons or blows of whips, only the cold, the silence, and the cracking of that ice that was both prison and executioner. Virgil explained that this circle was divided into 4 zones, each reserved for a deeper kind of betrayal. The first was China, where traitors against their own kin met. There, the shadows could barely move their heads on the icy surface, and their gazes reflected the shame of having destroyed the bond of blood. Their faces, hardened by frost, seemed to silently beg for forgiveness, but there was no answer in that void. Further on was Antinora, where the traitors to their country lay, those who had sold cities, towns, and nations out of ambition or cowardice. Here, bodies were trapped up to their necks, their heads rigid, crashing against each other as they tried to move. No words were possible, only a muffled murmur, as if their tongues themselves had frozen in their mouths. Dante looked at familiar faces from Italian history, men who had traded loyalty for profit, and felt a chill greater than the chill of ice. Then Ptolemy opened, a place reserved for those who betrayed their guests and friends, those who had opened the door of their house to them and shared their table. Here, the punishment was even more cruel. Souls fell into the ice even before their bodies died in the world. Their bodies on earth continued to be inhabited by demons, while their true spirits were engulfed in frost. The damned lay face up, their eyes open to the eternal sky, but their tears, when frozen, formed icy visors that sealed their vision forever. Finally, at the very bottom, Judea waited, the place of those who had betrayed their benefactors and masters. It was the final level of the abyss, where those who had turned against those who had entrusted them with everything were held. Here, the damned were completely entombed in ice, motionless, erased of all human expression, transformed into crystalline statues that breathed silent torment. Their form merged with the lake itself, as if the ice had devoured them, erasing the distinction between sinner and prisoner. The atmosphere was unbearably cold, even Dante's soul seemed to break under that icy breath. Virgil walked steadily, but his figure grew increasingly solemn, as if he knew they were reaching the threshold of the unspeakable. The silence grew even more absolute, broken only by a dull roar that seemed to come not from a condemned man, but from something vaster, more terrible. The ice began to tremble beneath their feet, as if a colossal heart were beating in the depths of the lake. Dante then understood that they were not only in the circle of betrayal, but on the threshold of the very center of hell, where the origin of all torment lay, the prison of the fallen angel. Virgil looked at him, his grave eyes brooking no questions. Prepare to behold what no mortal gaze should endure. Beyond these shadows lies Lucifer, Prince of Darkness, chained in the eternity of ice. And at that instant, Dante felt the night closing in on him as they advanced toward the final shudder of the infernal vision. The journey had reached the limits of terror. Dante and Virgil, having traveled through the circles where fire and ice punished the very essence of sin, found themselves before the absolute center of hell, a place where everything became motionless, where time seemed to have stopped in an eternal breath of silence. There, beneath the icy vault of Cocytus, stood the figure whose fall had caused the very fracture of the cosmos. Lucifer. His presence was not a simple body, but a mountain of shadows and ice, a colossus buried in the heart of the earth. There was no flame to envelop him, no demons to attend him. He himself was the torment and the prison. The rebel angel lay trapped in the frozen lake, his torso emerging from the frost, while his enormous black wings flapped in perpetual motion, generating the icy wind that kept the lake eternally frozen. Each flap of his wings was not freedom, but a chain. The more he struggled, the more he fed the cold that held him back. Dante, shuddering, saw his three-mouthed face, a triple visage that obscurely recalled the divine trinity, but distorted into an infernal parody. In each mouth, Lucifer relentlessly chewed on 3 supreme traitors, symbols of the most abject sin. In the central mouth, the most voracious, was Judas Iscariot, traitor to Christ, hanging upside down, torn by the fangs and claws of the Prince of the Night. In the other 2 jaws, one on the left and one on the right, were Brutus and Cassius, the conspirators against Julius Caesar, eternally devoured as emblems of betrayal of the benefactor and the order of the empire. The ice reached down to the demon's chest, imprisoning his monstrous form. His eyes shed tears of blood that froze instantly on his hardened skin, like petrified rivers on his face. His gaze was not that of an avenging god or a furious demon, it was emptiness itself, the mirror of endless despair. Dante felt his spirit shrink at the sight. It was not just the punishment of a fallen angel, but a vision of what happens when absolute pride confronts eternal power. Virgil, without pausing, spoke gravely, "Here is the enemy of all good, the father of lies, the bearer of rebellion. He does not cry out, he does not roar, because all hell is his voice. His silence is freezing, and his prison is eternal." Dante understood then that Lucifer did not reign in hell. He was chained within its core, the motionless source of all torment, a prisoner in the work of divine justice. His futile movement, his ceaselessly flapping wings, were the driving force of the icy wind that punished traitors. His very existence was his own perpetual punishment, a living symbol of the failure of the rebellion against the light. Guided by Virgil, Dante cautiously approached the Colossus. He discovered a hidden path in the beast's hairy flank, an unusual trail that descended beyond the visible. Virgil led him along this path, climbing among the ice and Lucifer's fleeces, as if scaling the ruins of a world. Dante, astonished, felt that as he descended, they reached a point where orientation was no longer possible, up and down merged, and the very weight of their bodies reversed. At that moment, Virgil stopped and calmly explained, "We have reached the center of the universe, the point where all weights and all directions converge. Here, gravity is confused and motion is reversed. Do not be afraid if the world seems to spin, for what we are leaving behind is hell, and what awaits us is the other side of the earth." As he passed beyond the center, Dante felt he was no longer descending, but beginning to ascend. The air changed. From the stifling frost, a lighter, moister breath gradually emerged, bringing with it the promise of the surface. The sound of the ice faded, replaced by the distant murmur of a hidden river running in the darkness. For hours they walked through that secret passage, through narrow caves and along steep paths, until finally the darkness began to clear. Before them appeared the exit, a narrow opening in the rock, from which a faint glow emanated. Dante, wearily, dragging himself behind his guide, saw the darkness shatter into a burst of light, and together, their bodies covered in dust and their souls shaken by what they had seen, they emerged to the surface. It was dawn in the other hemisphere. Before his eyes, the sky rose clear and studded with stars, as if the universe itself wanted to offer them solace after their journey into the abyss. The cool night air hit Dante's face, and for the first time in a long time, he felt he could breathe without a weight on his chest. There, at the foot of the mountain of purgatory, he understood that the infernal journey had ended, but that a new one was beginning, the ascent toward redemption, purification, and the vision of the divine. Dante looked up at the firmament, and his heart was filled with a different silence, no longer of terror, but of reverence. He had seen the depths of human misery, he had contemplated the prison of the fallen angel and the justice of God in all its harshness. Now, with Virgil at his side, he prepared for the next stretch of the journey, the path toward the light. Thus ended the descent through the circles of hell, and the ascent toward hope began. But that story will come later. Have a lovely rest.